Good morning and welcome. My name is Sandy McBrayer, and I am calling to order the California Department of Education Before and After School Advisory. I want to welcome everyone here, both in presence and those online. This is our first live stream. I want to personally thank Michael and Josh and Fred and the entire team who made this happen. I know many of you behind in the audience are part of this, making sure this runs smoothly today. We have heard for quite a while from members in the field that what happens at the state advisory, we never get to see, we don't have dollars to come travel, we're busy running programs. So we're coming to you. And so it's a very exciting day for us, but we also know that with technology, there can be glitches. So we're asking for grace and patience today as we go through this process, but this will be our new format. All of the members, as usual, we request that you be present. It's part of what we signed up for, to be here as a team, to talk and discuss and guide the department and the legislature and the governor as they look at expanded learning from ELLP to 21st century to ACES. So we're thrilled that you're all here today. I'm going to actually ask members to introduce themselves. So Tiffany, I'm going to turn to you if you can introduce yourself and also where you work and what seat you fill, if you know all those things.
Good morning, Tiffany Gibson. I work for the California After School Network, and I'm representing community colleges.
Thank you.
Julie Brooks. I work for Woodcraft Rangers, and I'm representing large elementary division appointed by Speaker Rivas.
Tia Dwyer with Think Together. Tia Dwyer with Think Together, and I am here to represent Urban Before and After School.
Wonderful, thank you.
I'm Cindy Haas. I'm from Tehama County Department of Education, and I am representing the rural after school.
Thank you. Brad?
Brad Lupian with ARC, representing large middle schools.
Hello, Olivia Kernan from the Humboldt County Office of Education, representing rural schools.
Tony Brown, Heart of Los Angeles, and I'm representing small after-school programs appointed by the Senate Rules Committee.
Good morning, everyone. Diane Ortiz, Youth Alliance, and I'm representing small middle schools appointed by Speaker Rivas.
Thank you. And our key staff today, Josh, Michael, and Fred. Fred, do you want to start?
Fred Buggs, Expanded Learning Division.
Josh?
Joshua Brady with the Expanded Learning Division.
And Michael.
Good morning, Michael Funk, Division Director at the After School Division. Welcome, everyone. Sorry I'm not there with you, but I'm glad we have this opportunity to do this technologically for this meeting.
Thank you. All right, we're going to review the meeting materials, Fred, that everyone has in their packets.
What you'll find in your packet on your left-hand side, you'll find the agenda for today's meeting. Behind that, the draft minutes from our April meeting. And then on the right-hand side of your folder, you will find the Expanded Learning Division updates.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So on your left side with the minutes, we ask members to review the minutes, and I seek an approval with a motion to accept and a second. I'll give you a moment to review.
I'd like to move that we accept the minutes.
I have a motion from Tony.
I second.
I have a second from Diane. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries. Thank you very much. We've moved the agenda around a little bit this morning because we have a presentation from CAN, and I know Jeff, I think, is in two places at once. So Jeff, I'm going to actually turn it over to you to start with the California After School Network.
Hello and good morning, and appreciate the flexibility this morning, and thank you, Josh, for bringing up the slides for CAN. I'm going to begin the presentation, and then I'm going to also turn it over to the California After School Network's Director of Policy and Outreach, Heather Williams, to round out the presentation. But again, appreciating the flexibility this morning. Josh, could we go to the next slide? All right, so in the California After School Network update today, you will find some information around the ecosystem plan for expanded learning and some opportunities that we're trying to make the field available to. Upcoming events, including academies and symposium, and then some policy updates and kind of some reflections on recent activity at the federal level, and looking ahead, just providing some information that our contract is in the approval process at the department, and during the next meeting, looking forward to sharing the elements of that contract and progress from our first quarter of work. Josh, if you could advance the slide, please. And one more. Last time that I was here, I think I introduced the notion of an ecotone, right? And an ecotone is this biological or ecological concept that when two ecosystems meet, like for example, here in Sacramento, just east of us, where the oak woodland meets the conifer forest heading up the Sierra Nevada mountains, where those two ecosystems meet, you see a place where there's all the critters from the oak woodland and all the critters from the conifer forest, and they all live in the same place. That notion of ecotone is where we see the highest level of ecological richness or biodiversity. What we're really trying to do with the ecosystem plan for expanded learning is leverage expanded learning as a platform for a human ecotone, right? And generate what Michael Funk in his conversation at the Boost conference recently, or not so recently, referred to as an abundance mindset, right? Generating abundance out of scarcity. Go ahead and advance the next slide, please, Josh. And the process by which we're going to be looking to create this ecosystem plan for expanded learning is through multiple layers of field engagement. So there's multiple sort of teams of individuals and people that are guiding this work. So there's a core team that is sort of leading the implementation, sort of the heavy lifting of the effort. There's a design team that is a cross-sector group of individuals that informs then how the core team implements its process. And then there is what we envision as a very large, over 100 member group called the Ecosystem Advisory Team. This is going to emulate a similar process that the California After School Network used to convene the Whole Child Health and Wellness Collaborative when we created cross-sector strategies for whole child health and wellness, outlined in a statement of strategic direction toward equity-driven whole child health and wellness. We employed a very similar strategy of engaging large cross-sector groups to create a shared vision and then shared strategies together. And that's going to be the work of the Ecosystem Advisory Team. And then we're going to work with other partners as well for other needs, such as data analysis or storytelling in terms of how this sort of initiative rolled out. So there's a lot of sort of different components of this work. And let's go ahead and go to the next slide. I'd mentioned that we were emulating a strategy from when we convened the Whole Child Health and Wellness Collaborative, but we're also emulating strategies that were used to create Strategic Plan 1.0 and 2.0. So you can see on the slide in front of you, there's really a very similar sort of process happening. The only difference really in this process compared to prior processes is that instead of the CDE Foundation being the sort of the pass-through for the resources that support the effort, that pass-through is now the Foundation for California Community Colleges, which is the fiscal sponsor of the California After School Network. Very similar leadership structure in terms of the expanded learning division and the field, essentially guiding the process, and the California After School Network being a vessel for the will of a cross-sector group. Next slide, please. And this is just another slide that says, I think, what I've already said, descriptions of other groups. So let's go ahead and advance to the next slide, which I believe, which is also outlining the multiple sectors that we're hoping to engage. And go ahead and take a look at this. I'm going to offer you an invitation to share within your own networks. And those of you that are taking a look at this from all areas of the state, hope that you will mobilize your networks and those that you know that might fall in these categories of professionals for the next step of work, which is, I believe, outlined on the next slide. Which isn't on this slide, it'll be on the next slide, which is to join the advisory team. But if we could, so this is the opportunity that is out there now, but Josh, if we could just go back two more to the timeline, all to say that all of these humans will inform all of these strategies and all of those configurations. And we anticipate to convene that advisory team at least 3 times. And we'll be doing this all the way through the fall of 2026, when we imagine that this plan will be released. And then we're also, at the same time as we're looking for resources to create the plan, once the plan is released, we hope it doesn't live on a shelf. So we're also looking for resources to spread the good news once it's there, and then engage the multiple sectors in the efforts that are outlined in the plan as well. Okay, Josh, if we could go back to the sort of beginning of the overview of the presentations at this point, but yes, please do spread the word for the Ecosystem Advisory Team. And at this point, I'll turn the mic to my colleague, Heather Williams, CAN's Director of Policy and Outreach.
Good morning, folks. Great to be here. As Jeff said, my name is Heather Williams. I'm the Director of Policy and Outreach with California After School Network. So just a few updates. We were recently at MTSS. Well, I was not there, but Tiffany and other colleagues were there, as well as our colleagues at ASAP Connect. We partnered with the CDE Expanded Learning Division to build out a whole pre-conference and 5 workshop strand at MTSS, talking about expanded learning and expanded learning's role within MTSS. And as you can see, the various topics listed on this slide, I'm not going to read them all. And then we've also had numerous regional trainings, July, August. Our equity and quality team has been quite busy traveling all over the state of California. And then in December, we were actually selected and will be presenting at the California School Boards Association annual conference. So looking forward to talking about the work a few of our team members have been doing around school-based mental health and how we leverage expanded learning to support that work in our schools. And Josh, I'll probably go through the next few slides quickly. Just want to highlight upcoming opportunities. So this is something we shared out recently in our newsletter. These are our statewide virtual expanded learning, like technical assistance activities for the rest of the year. So we have office hours, summer, fall, winter, and spring. So all the dates are set for that. The registration is open for many of those. And then we also have dates selected for our Fall Academy and our Spring Academy, as well as Site Coordinator Symposium. So if we go through the next slide, summer office hours is almost done. We have 1 left next week, and then we will be launching into fall office hours on the next slide. And so those kick off in September. We'll be offering 4 dates. Again, we've rebranded them to refer to them as EXL office hours as opposed to ELOP, because we really do want folks to understand that they should be running programs in a comprehensive way. And so conversation can also include questions, discussion on ACES and 21st century. And registration is open for that. And then we will be doing our Fall Academy September 16th, 18th, 30th, and October 1st. We are in process of finalizing the 4 topics for those sessions that will likely be released at the end of this week, along with registration. So you can save the dates for now, but registration should be open relatively soon. Those topics are selected again, like hot topics, what folks are navigating in the field at this time. And then we just opened up registration, the ability to submit an RFP, and the ability to partner for our upcoming site coordinator symposium in February 2026. One thing to note, usually virtual and in-person are back-to-back. We actually separated them out by about 2 weeks. So you'll see that virtual is February 4th, and then the in-person is several weeks later, February 27th and 28th. And registration's open for all of that. And so we would love to have lots of site coordinators submit RFPs and present. So really encourage you all to work with your site coordinators if they're doing high quality work to submit a RFP for a workshop, support them to go present. Even if they've never done it before, we would love to have them. All right, policy updates. So a lot has been happening in the policy world. I'm also going to go through this somewhat quickly, but I can slow down or pause if there's questions at the end. So hopefully by now, everybody is aware that the state budget passed and there is an overall increase in ongoing funding for ELOP by $525.5 million. That increase is to cover a couple changes that I'll go over in a moment. And then existing reimbursement rates for ACES and 21st century programs were maintained. CAN sent out a policy update that walked through all of this in detail, so it is on our website as well. So on the next slide, this goes over the actual, pretty graph. This shows you what the funding looks like this year. So the total funding is $5.4 billion for expanded learning in California. Very exciting. On the next slide, this actually will show you the growth of expanded learning funding since fiscal year 2021. So this is pretty fantastic, just to see that growth since that time. And then on the next slide, this goes over the budget trailer bill impacts on expanded learning. So for folks who are not in the weeds of the budget process, there's a budget bill that has the numbers, and then there are budget trailer bills that have the details of how the budget will be implemented. So that's where the governor and the legislature have been working on a lot of different changes to expanded learning. And there's several changes that impact ELOP funding. So there's rate changes at this point. Hopefully most folks are aware that rate 1 went from 75% unduplicated to 55% unduplicated pupil percentage. So significant increase in LEAs that are able to access the rate 1 beginning this year. There is also the intent for rate 2 to be no less than 1,575. That was a result of another assembly bill. To be clear, that's not what's in the budget. So currently rate 2 is slightly lower than that. Intent means it would be ideal if that's rate 2, but there is work to be done to get rate 2 up to that actual amount. Minimum apportionment amount was increased. So we went from 50,000 to 100,000. So great news for all our small and rural school districts. And then offer access, the definition was updated to include some additional language. So there was a request to clarify what offer access means. The legislature took this as meaning to put in some examples of what communication means. I think Some of our advocates were hoping for something different, but this is what is in the language. And then there was an update to audits. So on the next slide, I have some more detail that walks through that because that language can be a little confusing. So this is the technical language that's in the Education Omnibus Trailer Bill. If you are reading that and you don't understand that, that's the point of the law. It's to be precise, not easy to understand. So on the next slide, this helps break down the different sections that the trailer bill language is referring to. So the rate 1 requirements. And then on the next slide is the translation or easier to understand version of what's in the trailer bill. So beginning this year, LEAs received funding at rate 2 last year and are receiving funding at rate 1 this year are subject to audit requirements with the rate 2 requirements for the current fiscal year. And then for each year thereafter, it's subject to the rate 1 requirements. So that if that's still confusing, there's a table there to walk you through what that would look like. So we do have a lot of LEAs that are moving from rate 2 to rate 1 this year. So they are going to be held accountable to offer and provide access to all unduplicated students. And then in the following year, next fiscal year, is when they'll be held accountable to the higher audit requirement of offering and providing access to all students. Next slide. Also, attendance recovery is happening. It's here. So beginning this year, LEAs can offer attendance recovery. That can be done in conjunction with ELOP. There are a lot of resources already. People have been talking about it for a while, but we know LEAs have had a lot on their plate, so they may have not been tracking it. So on our website, we've compiled some of the state level resources that are out and available all in one place. So that will link you to CDE guidance and resources, including a CalPADS flash update, which is a technical term to say like how CalPADS provides updates to the field on how to record attendance recovery in CalPADS. The Partnership for Children and Youth issued a brief recently on this and recommendations for how LEAs can partner with Expanded Learning. So that's a great resource. And then back in spring, our ELOP Academy had a lot of different divisions from CDE that talked through some of the implications and strategies to support attendance recovery. So for districts that are lost on where to start, go through these resources. There's still a lot of in the weeds details. That's a great question to bring to office hours as folks are starting to implement, but these are good resources for folks to start. And then I think the last thing on federal or on policy updates is really this conversation around federal policy. So while the state policy landscape looks great for us, right? Lots of increases in funding, a lot of support to Expanded Learning. At the federal level, we are definitely seeing challenges with the recent, withholding of funds. Those have fortunately been released, but on the next slide, we are just really reflecting on, fortunately, the funding was released from the feds to the states this year. Fortunately, Congress initial budget proposals look like 21st Century is going to remain stable, but this activity definitely highlighted the threat to 21st Century. That would be detrimental to many states. In California, it would definitely be detrimental to our assets programs, to our high school programs. It would have a huge impact to the CDE Expanded Learning Division, and it would also have a devastating impact to the broader system of support for Expanded Learning because all of those systems are disproportionately funded by federal funding. So we are considering various strategies. We definitely want to engage folks on this older youth topic. If 21st Century is truly threatened in the future, if it's eliminated, what happens to support at all of these levels? And how can we work with our older youth practitioners and educate decision makers to look at solutions? It's come up with ELOP. We know right now ELOP is not the solution because it is really targeted to our younger kids. So what are the alternatives that we need to look at if 21st Century is eliminated? And then lastly, we normally share about CDE contract deliverables. On the next slide, it's not final yet. So once it's finalized, it's almost there. In the very last rounds of being finalized. Once we finalize it, we will share the contents of the CDE contract. And just know this year, for the next 3-year cycle for our contract, we actually reorganized it and to align it with the TA structure that we use in the system of support for expanded learning and other systems of support. So we organized our TA into universal, targeted, and critical and emerging strategies. So universal types of tasks look like office hours, look like our academies. Targeted tasks look like providing support at the regional level, targeted workshops and conferences, and critical and emerging gives us space to navigate things like what happened with the federal policy and funding this year. So I believe that is it. Thank you.
Any questions for Heather
Jeff's still here.
and Jeff? Sorry, Diane?
That was a really great presentation. Thank you for the detail of that. If it's possible, I'd love to get a copy emailed ahead of time, if possible.
Yeah, we're working on that
Yeah.
because, we're working on that because of legal requirements.
Yeah,
with
I was
CDE
wondering.
And the formatting of that. So Jeff and Josh have been working on that. So we're going to solve that before the next meeting.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
It will be compliant moving forward.
You guys got it?
Josh, they said they got it. You just,
Yeah, the link was shared with everyone.
I am so sorry. I missed that. But yeah, can you call me next time? Make sure I No, I apologize for missing that. I was really looking forward because I know the presentations come in and I love the detail of that. I'm curious about the restorative justice, the diversion, the youth rights advocacy. I think that's really amazing to include in the ecosystem model. And I'm wondering how, if you're focusing on the how and engagement specifically of young people that are the most vulnerable or at promise, suspended, expelled, or, dealing with other issues that are going on. Just like if your focus is not just on the what, but also on the how, like the strategies for engagement, how you would include that, and just tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure, I can speak to that a little bit. And Jeff, if you want to add anything. Right now, so Vanessa Hernandez is our staff person who primarily facilitates this work, and she's working with our design team. And that's actually part of the work of the design team to outline, these are all the sectors we want to engage, including youth engagement. When we engage with youth, we want to make sure we're doing it appropriately and in a non-harmful way. And so one of the strategies that we're working on building out is how do we leverage organizations that already exist and give them kind of a toolkit to say, we are looking for this type of information. Can you work with your youth to get this information because you're already the trusted facilitator, trusted messenger. So as we're looking to collect data from those types of groups, it's really important that we're first working with the adults to explain, these are outcomes, this is what we're looking for. Can you work with your youth to bring this data? We're also working on hopefully getting some additional funding to increase the level of youth engagement. It frankly just costs a lot more to engage youth than it does adults. There's a lot of other additional considerations and care that need to be taken. So high level, that's where we're at. Hopefully next time we present, we'll have more specifics, but we're kind of in that place of outlining that strategy right now.
And then the only thing that I'll just jump in and add is I've taken note of that to pass along to Vanessa as a recommendation. This group has had the opportunity to have one round of input to that plan as well, and it won't be the last round. So input just like that is what we'll be seeking, and appreciate that question.
Julie?
Thanks. Just a quick clarification question around the rate changes for those that are coming from tier 2 to tier 1 this year, right? The 55 to 75. Many of those districts, we're hearing from districts, many of them have already set up structures where there's subsidy from ELOP and then there's fee-based, right? That's on a sliding scale. I just want to make sure with the revision of the trailer bill language that that's still possible for them to conduct that as long as, right, it's universally accessible.
a comprehensive program, including fees, is still very much on the table for any of our programs. You just need to make sure you follow the requirements in terms of who's exempt from paying fees.
Perfect. Thanks for the clarification. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Heather. And as we talk about the world of juvenile justice, I think it's important. Every county is required to have a juvenile justice coordinating council in line with the Schiff Cardenas bill many years ago. The Juvenile Justice Crime Prevention Act, it's got a whole long name, but that's a place that's actually mandated and it actually has slots or seats that are designated. So the DA, the public defender, the bench, the probation department, alcohol and drug services, a lot of providers are sitting there. So that would be a great place to be able to access because they oversee from diversion to graduated sanctions, all those kids in between. So that might be a place to think about too, where we could access and they meet regularly. It's a public meeting, but they have a lot of different funding resources coming to them, the JJCPA and others that come in to fund those programs and services.
That's such a great point, Sandy. In the idea of having mentors and mentorship is so powerful. And the reason I had brought that up in particular is because the education data that we've seen shows, middle school students really at risk for suspension and expulsion, especially some of these, unhoused youth, foster youth, a lot of young people going through a lot of stress. And so being able to have a coordinated strategy to and make sure that our young people have an alternative and to stay engaged in after school is really, really important. So thank you for that.
Noted. And I would say if you have connections with specific individuals, I would encourage them to join the advisory team and be part of that process so that we can do additional outreach, but also embed them in that particular group.
So Heather, thank you very much. I want to encourage all members and those who are watching us today. I think might be over about 150 right now. That really to participate with the academies, the symposiums, the trainings, the virtual trainings. They are incredibly helpful with the California After School Network. It's a ton of great information, and as you can see with just Heather, they know the weeds, so they'll be able to answer questions and help. And great presentation, Jeff and Heather, and thank you. Heather, I also want to thank you because you just did my whole presentation. So I am not going to talk about the budget bill that was chaptered or the change of tier 1 and tier 2. I do just want to point out a couple of quick things. Yes, the Department of Ed released the Title IV Part 2, which is 21st Century on July 21st or 25th, actually. I do want to note that they did withhold some of the AmeriCorps funding in that, and that is significant. While expanded learning was spared, there are other programs that weren't. And so I think as we talk about our partners, we have to recognize that we need to support a wider group of partnerships to make sure our young people have opportunity for working with other young people. I do want to say that, as Heather mentioned, the 21st Century Title IV Part B is still at the same 1.3 billion for current but the Senate appropriations did. The House did hold off markups until September, so we still have to continue our advocacy. We still have to be writing our congressional leaders because we don't want the markups in September to decrease this amount. So I think it's important for us to have parents and families, all of our partners that are in this field, to continue to push to make sure that we can continue to have a voice. Many states only have 21st century funding for their expanded learning. While we're fortunate in California, there are some states that it would just wipe out expanded learning completely. So I think California has a large voice. We have a large constituency. We have many, many families who are engaged in the expanded learning field. So to encourage and get them to speak up and speak out for some of the smaller states who just don't have that same body behind them, that same group, that our voice really matters. And that's part of the advisory, is to speak up and to speak out and to protect both California, but other places also. I did want to note that one of our members, Diane, mentioned that Cory Booker had some conversation or pending legislation about mentorship. So I will look into that more for the next meeting and be able to bring that back to see where that's going on the federal level. But thank you, Heather and Jeff, for covering the rest of the legislation and the budget. I appreciate it. Any questions on any of those? All right, I am going to turn it over to Michael to do an expanded learning update and announcements. Michael, I think you're going first.
Well, I'm going to go first and then turn it to Josh. Josh has a lot of stuff that he put into writing and it's been a busy time. I just want to say that part of Heather's presentation mentioned that the intent in the budget bill or the language said it is the intent of the legislature that rate 2 be established at $1,575. Of course, intent is not binding language. It's just that, it's the intent. I think Heather used the words, work needs to be done. And I can't be super definitive at this point, but I want to assure you that a lot of work is being done. And there's still the intent for that rate 2 to be 1575. And so it's not necessarily, there's things moving, and until it's in the budget bill junior, it's still the intent, but I can just assure you that there's movement there. And Sandy, thank you for mentioning the Senate markup for Labor, Health, Human Services, Education Committee. What's significant about that is that the administration's intent was to take things like Title 4B and many of the other titles and combine them into one funding bucket that would be administered to states with maximum flexibility and do away with the titles. And so the very fact that the Senate, in a very strong bipartisan vote, I mean, it wasn't like this barely passed. This was a very strong bipartisan vote to keep these titles individually funded as intended by Congress. Title 4B was proposed level funded, as Sandy said, but I'm sure you noticed, Sandy, that AmeriCorps was also in that markup for $650 million, which was also a good sign. So I also want to say that the month of July was crazy. It was rare that a day didn't go by here at the department that we weren't pulled into some type of discovery to provide information to our legal counsel, to provide information to the Attorney General's office, to provide information to go into a lawsuit for X, Y, or Z, and literally almost every day. And so the fact that the funding was released, I've said this before. Yes, Title 4B was released. Yes, other titles were released. I remember the day at CDE where on a Wednesday, all the other titles were released. We got the grant award notifications, different divisions, like migrant education was severely impacted. And if you're not familiar, migrant education is, and you know, we should work more closely with Migrant Ed. They do a lot of the similar type programming, and several county offices of education who fund migrant education staff to support programming for students who are eligible had either suspended those staff, put them on leave, or even let them go. All of those staff have been rehired or in the process of being rehired. So we can celebrate the release of the funds, but I just want on the record, because this is the statutorily created advisory committee, these minutes go into the record, permanent record of the state of California. Harm was done. And I know that many of you on the panel, which are running programs, many of you had to shut down summer programs or suspend planning for the fall because of uncertainty of the federal funding. So harm was done. And I just want to make sure that we're acknowledging that and we stay vigilant. There's another probably even more significant proposal that was part of the Labor H markup for the Senate. And that is that the markup included language that required the administration to release the funding when it's intended to be released. So that's actually, if that language goes through, that means next year, the administration, like they did this year on July 1 or June 30th, impound the funds. So that's significant language. And there's a lot of stuff moving. Josh Brady has been doing a lot of hard work, put some things into some detail that you have in your document. I'll turn it over to Josh right now.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Before I get to the update on the screen here, again, just want to thank the board members and thank those that are attending virtually. First time streaming this. I do want to announce some Expanded Learning Division staffing updates. We do have another staff services manager that is helping to oversee the analysts. One is in person. His name is Kindred Bang. He's been around for over a year, and we have recently promoted Emily Romine. She is attending virtually. She has been an analyst for many years in the division, has a good foundation of the operations that the analysts do. And so she is a brand new manager, less than a month in. And so for the first time in a long time, we have a full management team. And so that is good news. We'll be working very closely. And with these updates, you'll be able to see some of the things that, we're going to be paying close attention to. The first item is 21st Century Community Learning Centers. You'll see in that first bullet, it talks about, we have about approximately $141 million available still. And this was from an influx of ESSER funds during COVID-19. A tidings waiver was approved by the California State Board of Education, which was then submitted to the U.S. Department of Education. There is information below on what a tidings waiver is, but what this essentially would do, if approved, would extend the obligation period of these funds from September 30th, 2025 to September 30th, 2026. The good news is the waiver was approved by the U.S. Department of Education on August 11th, 2025. So what does this mean since we have all of these extra funds? Well, the plan right now is for the Expanded Learning Division to post a one-time 21st Century supplemental RFA. Currently, it is going through a legal review, and it will be posted for one-time funds with a performance period of July 1st, 2025 through September 30th, 2026. Now you'll note in the parentheses, this is dependent on budget authority in 25-26. So we are working on that with other colleagues and other divisions within CDE to make this happen. So that's the first thing. Who would be eligible for this RFA? Eligible applicants would include current cohort 13, 14, 15, 21st Century Middle, assets, and ACES grantees. The grant amount options that agencies could apply for each site would be $50,000, $100,000, or $150,000 per site based on the needs selected by the applicant. We would require a short narrative on how the funds will be used, and this would be similar to how we fund ACES, where it would be the highest FRPM to the lowest FRPM. So again, planning on doing a one-time supplemental RFA for this big balance of carryover funding. I will pause there to see if there's any questions, and then I'll pass it to Michael if you wanted to talk more about the fiscal year 26 funding update.
Thank you, Josh. Brad has a question.
Yes.
Thank you, Josh. Yeah, my question is around bullet 3 on the when. Is there any specificity on that when the RFA would be released? And my second question is on bullet 4 with the and ACES grantees. So is it any ACES grantee in any stage, any year? Is there any further parameters other than just basically anybody?
Well, so the first answer to your question is we're going as fast as we can to post this RFA. So as soon as possible, it will be posted, but this is the first time that we are stating it publicly that this is the plan to issue a one-time supplemental RFA. So as soon as possible. The other question, the other answer to your question regarding eligibility, again, ACES grantees, they're all in a 3-year cycle, cycle A, B, or C. So it's anyone that has a current ACES grant and anyone that has a current cohort 13, 14, and 15 21st century elementary, middle, or assets grant. Those are the eligible applicants that can apply.
Thank you.
Josh, I want to add just two things. First of all, by the way, we're now up to 216 in the live stream, so you're getting close, Brad. Josh mentioned FRPM, that's free reduced meals. So the funding is prioritized based on the economic need of the school site. So that's students eligible, the percentage of students eligible for free and reduced price meals. That's FRPM. Secondly, he mentioned budget authority, and I want to make sure I back up and unpack that a bit. There's $141 million of carryover that accumulated over different years. And part of that was when money already paid out many years ago to 21st century grantees using 21st century funds was swapped in the back end with ESSER 3 because ESSER 3 had to be spent down sooner. So that's part of how that surplus was created. We had $300 million of ESSER 3 money that was earmarked for after school and summer programs and couldn't be spent on anything else. Well, that's 2 years worth of federal funding for 21st century. So those are the dynamics that caused this amount of money. But Josh mentioned that it's contingent on budget authority. So even if you have money in an account, you can't spend it unless the legislature gives you and the administration gives you budget authority to spend it. So we currently have budget authority to spend this grant allocation, this year's grant allocation for 21st century to fund the 3 cohorts that we have. So we need an additional budget authority for the one-time funding. It looks like it's moving. It looks like we've been answering questions from Department of Finance and the legislature. People understand it. I don't anticipate a problem, but that is what we're talking about when we're talking about budget authority, that's contingent upon budget authority.
Thank you, Michael. Brad has another question.
Thanks, and sorry. I always have lots of questions. As I think about this a little bit more, will a grantee of 21st century that has before school supplemental and after school write one narrative for one, either 50, 100, 150, or will those be looked at as individual grants? Same for the handful of ACES before school and after school. Like, would a school that has ACES before school and after school apply separately for 50K for supplemental for before and 100K for after school, or would it be looked at as one application for that site?
So a good question, Brad. I didn't put that in here, but it would just be one narrative for all sites, right? And you wouldn't be applying for a specific component, as this would be a supplemental RFA one-time funds. They could be used for before school, after school, before school supplemental, after school supplemental. So we're kind of wrapping this into whatever is best based on the needs of the applicant. And so there would be a lot of flexibility for this RFA.
But you're not eligible, Brad, if I understand your question, to apply for 50K for before school, 150K for after school at the same school site. That
makes sense.
Correct.
Thank you for clarifying.
One narrative, one site. Correct?
No, one narrative, as many sites as they want to apply for.
Sorry, one narrative per school site.
No, one narrative for
an
local
application.
educational agency. So a school district writes one narrative and then they add all the school sites they want to put in it. So it's not a narrative for every, so again, if you're not, as a reminder, ACES and 21st Century funds are awarded to school sites. In this case, a school district would write one narrative and include all of the school sites they want to include in the RFA and the amount they're applying for each school site.
All right, Diane has a question.
So would it be possible at this point to have rural schools gather together into a consortium for this particular application so that each rural school did not have to write a proposal each due to
Well,
capacity and timing?
I'll say this, they need to be existing grantees, but I'm going to tell you this. The question that we're asking is very simple. It's not a full-blown narrative. It's for documentation purposes, so we have a clear understanding of what the funds will be used for. It's not going to be scored. Again, the awards will be based on the highest free and reduced price meal percentages to the lowest. And the reason why we included ACES grantees is because we have $141 million available. And based on what we saw for ESSER Summer, for those that remember, we actually had to do 3 rounds of ESSER funding to get all the funds out the door. We had to do 2 rounds of an RFA, and then we did a round 1 renewal. And that just goes to tell you the scale of how much it took to get ESSER out the window. $141 million, a lot more flexibility, opening it up to existing 21st and ACES. The hope is that we can get $141 million out the door. But the narrative is a very simple question, and it will not take a lot of work.
Thank you, Josh. I would be remiss to not say Brad has another question.
Of course, Brad, I wouldn't expect anything less.
Sorry, 214 people. Nice to meet you. My other question is around,
I'm sorry, Michael?
223.
My other question is around the compliance component of these funds. I'm making an assumption that there is no additional attendance requirement for these additional funds. So it wouldn't be you must serve X number of students with these funds. I'm assuming it's a layered funding to increase the quality of the programs. From a, will these funds follow the same expenditure and CQI requirements that existing 21st Century does, or any other compliance components?
Yeah, good question. As these are one-time funds, available from July 1st through September 30th of the following year, there is no reduction there. And so the funds would enhance you're already doing, or to add additional slots. There would be reporting still on expenditures quarterly, like we always have. And again, we would ask for attendance numbers. If you are serving additional students with these funds, you would enter those attendance numbers. If you're not, you would enter 0. But again, the flexibility, it's great, and that's why it's a one-time supplemental award for a little over a year.
Thank you.
Hope that answers your question, Brad.
Other questions?
Any other questions from the board members on 21st Century?
No other questions.
All right. Well, you thought there was an RFA coming out for 21st. Let me scroll down and talk about ACES. As we mentioned at the last advisory committee meeting, we had quite a few questions for both ACES and 21st. But because of over $54 million in ACES grant reductions, basically everyone that applied for the last ACES Universal was funded, except for those that were disqualified. The final intent to award for sites that we funded was a little over $20 million. So what does this mean? We still have a little over $33 million available for 25-26. So the plan right now, the tentative plan is to post a second round ACES Universal RFA that will be posted soon. It is being reviewed internally. Again, we do ACES every year. So, again, as fast as possible. But basically, that is the plan for ACES. If we don't do anything, we would lose it. And so the plan is, let's post it. Let's see if anyone else applies. And again, this year, because we had, we funded everyone, we actually funded down to 0% FRPM. That is the first time since I have been in the expanded learning division, which is 2008, that we have funded down to 0% FRPM. Typically, we probably have between 4 million, sometimes maybe 16 million available, depending on reductions. But this was the first time that this has ever occurred. And so now we are tentatively going to put out a second round of ACES Universal funding. I will pause there to see if there's any questions.
Josh, I'd like to add something for the record.
Yeah.
Reductions, one of the things that has been discovered when our system of support is working with districts that received pretty significant reductions is that many of the districts were not operating one comprehensive program. You know, we talked about reductions at the last advisory committee. And people, for whatever reason, were not listening to us when we all believed reductions would be a thing of the past if people are running one comprehensive program with ELOP and ACES, because you can count the attendance, you shouldn't have any waiting lists, you've got all this money. And yet we have seen examples. I received a bunch of information just this last week from our system of support of a district received ELOP funding. They went out and hired someone to manage an administrator to lead the ELOP. They didn't even talk to their expanded learning person. They ran 2 separate programs. They didn't really pay attention to the details. They didn't get the support they needed. And then they got audit findings for ELOP and they got reductions for ACES. And so we're hoping now we're seeing examples of some of our very large districts now understanding, oh, I got to figure out how to do one comprehensive program. So it's the best thing for kids and families, but it's also not doing that results in this massive amount of reductions that now we have money to go back out to the system. So that's some context for you.
Thank you, Michael. Josh, I do have a question. I know we've talked before about the disqualifications, and oftentimes they're what I would call more clerical or people missing sections. Does that still hold true?
Yes. Again, I kind of shared this last time, but some weren't even eligible to apply and they applied. What happens sometimes is the agency will print out the forms. They won't submit it in Assist and they'll mail it in. So that's not allowed. You have to actually submit the application in Assist, print the forms out, sign them and mail them in. Some just send us a cover page. That's it. I mean, I've seen it all when it comes to applying for ACES. And again, working with a lot of the other states out there on 21st Century, I'm part of the 50 state network. ACES, from my experience, is probably one of the simplest applications to apply for. It's a few forms. There is no narrative, and it's very simple. So yes, this last round, we had about 10 disqualifications. One appeal, and it was overturned. The reason for their disqualification was the signature. It didn't look like the authorized agent had applied. They did appeal. They showed us board minutes that the person was allowed to sign, and we overturned their appeal. So those are some of the examples of disqualifications.
Thank you.
Any other questions on ACES?
Yes, please. Brad has a question.
Of course.
eligibility questions on this one. If you were one of the DQ'd sites, can you reapply in this next round if you learned from your mistake?
Yeah, I mean, this is a new RFA. I will say, those that did get a reduction, they would not be eligible because the RFA clearly says that if you did get reduced, we cannot fund you because you just got reduced. So the language will still be the same, but anyone that was DQ'd, yeah, they can apply again.
If you,
Yep.
I did have a question about that reduction piece. So if you got a reduction, you're not eligible to apply. What about for those handful of schools that are grandfathered into before school ACES? If they took a reduction before school, can they apply on the after school side of the ACES?
Well, they can apply for after school because we don't fund before school anymore through ACES Universal. So if they got a reduction for before school, this is a different component. So of course they could apply.
Thank you.
Michael?
For clarity, if you're reduced, you have to wait a year, then you can apply. So that is the technical.
Thank you, Michael. Tony has a question.
After we look at all of these, disqualifications and reapplications, is there still a gap we would foresee in terms of unspent dollars? And if so, what can we recommend as an advisory committee, or what suggestions do staff have for potential solutions to problems that, I think in the field, some providers see around accessibility to LEAs showing up, principals in the 9 yards showing up to ask for requests for services and provide services. So sort of a two-part question, is there still money left on the table? And how do we improve accessibility so others can, because there are other providers I've heard in the Southern California area who, find it very difficult still to link up with an LEA and school principals. And if there's money left on the table, it seems like we should put some effort and energy into figuring that out as well.
Well, of course, the advisory committee has the responsibility and the right to make any recommendations they'd like the state to consider. I would say that maybe specifically to your point, Tony, if there is some of the 141 million federal money that doesn't go out, we will work with accounting mechanisms to first in, first out type of accounting, and whatever's left over will be applied to increase more school sites in the RFA that's going to be released next year. So 21st century will be used, and we have the ability to move that forward. ACES is more nailed down because the guidelines for how ACES money is spent is dictated by both Ed Code and Proposition 49, and limited to local educational agencies as the applicants in K through 8. So those are just facts for you, but there's nothing that prohibits the advisory committee from advising.
And I will add, Michael said, our analysts, they are going through a closeout process right now for ACES and 21st century. So at the November meeting, we will be prepared to share with you unspent funds for ACES 21st and 21st century. And we could even separate it out by region, but we'll definitely be prepared moving forward to share the closeouts and what was left on the table.
Thank you. And it'd be great to see something by region.
Yeah, absolutely. We can do that.
Thank you, Josh. Olivia has a question.
So with this ACES Universal RFA that'll be coming out, should we be encouraging sites that have a lower FRPM to be applying for this? I know traditionally it was what, 50%? Was that the standard that we would apply if they had over, or we would encourage to apply if they had over 50%? So with this last, with this last, the new supplemental. So should we be just encouraging folks that are interested in running a program to apply, or should we stick to the old standards of 50% or higher FRPM? Thank you.
I mean, the intent in the law is obviously 50%, but that's intent language. As mentioned, this is the first time we have ever funded down to 0% RPM. I mean, I think with that, you probably know the answer. I mean, it's and we only funded over $20 million. So we still have $33 million available. And again, this is one where this is the first time ever this has happened. Like I said, we've only typically had 4 million to be between 16 million available because of reductions. And so, I mean, basically anyone could apply that is eligible. And we'll see where the chips fall.
Thank you, Josh. I have
I don't know if
Julie and
Mark
then
Lee-
Diane.
Hi, I just want to ask point of clarification. The reduction question that was asked, I understand that that applies to the ACES RFA. Does it also apply to the supplemental funding? If you were reduced, are you ineligible for a year for the supplemental?
No, I would say it would be open to anyone because it's one-time supplemental funding.
Okay, great. Thanks for the clarification.
Diane?
Yeah, point of clarification on the eligibility for ACES funding. Are continuation schools, middle schools eligible to apply?
Any LEA is eligible to apply.
And would it be considered, because often they're very small schools, are they considered rural, or would it be what would the funding allocation?
It doesn't matter for ACES. It just LEAs are eligible to apply for ACES. We're 21st century. There's a whole list of agencies that are eligible.
Other questions? Are there any recommendations from members to the department as we move this forward? Brad?
Just food for thought, maybe. If there could be some consideration, if the department would consider letting either of the partners in the 21st century partnership grants be the applicant for the supplemental funds. My rationale is I think that you have some places where one of the two partners is more deeply invested in the day-to-day operations and how the funding could be spent most effectively for the young people, but they may not be the fiduciary agent in that scenario. So if either of the two partners would be eligible to apply, it might allow us to ensure the highest quality for our students with those funds. And then there's been a lot of talk at separate thought. There's been a lot of talk at multiple meetings around the state over the past year about older youth and the limited funds for older youth. So if there could be some consideration under the eligible applicants, including cohort 13, 14, 15 of 21st century assets and ACES, if there could be a consideration to include ELOP funded high school programs in that eligible applicants group.
So Brad, to understand both of your comments, I want the advisory committee to understand something that we have explored legally over the years. If you have a different partner serve as the lead applicant, then in essence, you're creating a new grant. And so that then makes it no longer a supplemental to an existing grantee. It makes it a new grant. And that ties our hands. And in the same way, if a high school is funded with ELOP only, it doesn't exist in our grant making system. So that again would be creating a new grant with one-time supplemental funding. So I understand the question, appreciate the question, but I also want to be real that there's a constraint in terms of creating new grants outside of the competitive process when something is deemed as eligible for existing grantees only.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for at least hearing it out and understanding where the question comes from.
Yeah, of course, Brett.
Thank you. Tony, you have a question?
Well, I'd just like to make a recommendation that we consider at the next meeting whether or not, if there are additional funds left over, there can be an alternative potential stream than the LAA, traditional LAA path, or look more closely at the LAA pathway and see if there are some holes there in terms of getting the funding out to communities.
Tony, can you talk more about that, about what you mean by an additional path, just so, again, the division's clear on what your recommendation is?
Sure, I understand that in order to receive funds, if you're in any given community, let's choose one with, you know, a high amount of FRPM students, for example, it would need to go through a traditional LEA, right? And then from there, it would go out to partners. For example, we could be speaking about ELOP dollars or any of some other dollars. And what I'm suggesting is that oftentimes those providers have been given opportunities to meet with principals, or with members of their staff to secure funding and pitch potential opportunities to serve, but folks have not shown up on the other end. So the provider's sitting there and no one's showing up. And so that's an issue. And I think it becomes a deterrent for folks to want to enter the system in the first place. So I'm hearing in this great report, examples in which, everyone who's going to apply is going to receive unless they're disqualified. And yet there are folks who actually can't just even get in. And so that's not a problem for, it's a problem for, I think, us as an advisory committee to figure out how can we create some other alternatives to the traditional LEA pathway, because it just might be resource issue on the LEA's part. But we shouldn't have funds obviously sitting there. We should spend all the funds we have, knowing that the need is there for all those funds. So I was just proposing that we look at alternative solutions for unspent funds.
Next, Tony.
And Josh, I think we can have that conversation at our November meeting when you bring back the unspent funds and we look at that regionally. I think that would give us more information or be better informed to look at what those gaps are at, by region. So.
Absolutely.
One more question from Diane.
Well, it's more of I guess it's just a question. Curious about then maybe in November, we could also get an idea of, what the impact of the fires and other emergency situations have been on some of these schools to actually show up to the table and apply, and thinking about that as a possible solution to supporting their access to these resources.
Yeah, I'm sure what we could do is based on that. I mean, specific to ACES in 21st Century, we do collect attendance relief for those programs. And so I'm sure based on the last calendar year, we probably have a record of which one, how many were submitted. We are actually working on guidance right now that will be sent out regarding attendance relief for ACES in 21st Century to make it easier for the field and also our staff, and also push up some timelines, which I'll get into in the next topic. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Josh. I see no more questions, so you can continue.
All right. Next topic is about our grant award notification timeline to the field. I think this is the first time we're kind of highlighting this and showing this. Again, want to give some kudos to the SSM1s, Emily and Kindred, along with the analyst team. Over the years, this has been a 3-month project. We have built a detailed timeline with steps that are involved. I would just wanted to kind of share with you the major steps that are involved. As you know, for those that have applied with Assist, that's our grants management system. And so it takes about 35 days to data build this for assist. And what we mean by data build, it's what are all the grant changes that have occurred? School site substitutions, any fiscal agent changes, grant reductions. We need a new data set now that is built into assist. So that's why it takes so long. And that's why moving forward, we're going to be trying to move up some deadlines, but also have some hard deadlines. Because the longer we let things play out, the longer the grant award notification timeline will be delayed. Next is the 14 days. It takes about 14 days for the GAN packet to be developed and sent to branch. Anything that is sent to our branch, minimum, it's a 10-day review for them to review packets. There's about 4 days for branch edits if needed. After that, it goes to the chief deputy office, minimum of 10 days to review, and then 5 days for the superintendent's correspondence unit. And you'll see in the note here, we are working to have all final intent towards posted, grant reductions finalized, and grant changes completed by the end of March. This will allow GANs to be sent out in July, August, once a budget is passed. That has not always been the case, right? We've let stragglers in, just different situations and things like that. But we need to, and we're going to be working on sending out an e-blast to the field, clearly highlighting this. The management team is working behind the scenes, and we will be discussing these at a future management meeting to kind of review this and all of us approve it. And so that's something that I just wanted to highlight. And I'll pause there to see if Michael has any comments on the GAN process.
We've been over very detailed spreadsheets. Where can we shave a day off here? How can we meet with a branch office in advance to coach them on what they're going to receive so it doesn't take the full 10 days? So we're still working to streamline. I know when I was in the field before I came to the department, how long could it take to get out this little piece of paper with a signature that says you're funded once you're awarded funded? Welcome to the inside. So it's what Josh and I said, we want to put information out there to explain to people why the grant award notification process takes months, not weeks, to get done. And we're still exploring ways to be more efficient. And perhaps when we are able to convert out of Assist to the GovGrant system, which is another process that's taking longer than we expected, some of this data build might be more automated. So we're just looking for clear transparency into why there is a months long process versus weeks.
Okay, with that, we'll
Thank you
take
very
any
much,
questions.
Michael and Josh.
We'll take any questions on this from the board.
Thank you very much. It really helps because, being able to see this when I hear, as Michael said for so long, it's in branch, it's in legal, it's in, we're just like, what? Go down the hall. But this really makes much more sense, and we appreciate showing us how the sausage is made. And it really helps with the field to be able to show them that there's a timeline and that you guys are working on efficiencies diligently and trying to figure out how you can shave off that day or two. But this is really clear, and I appreciate the transparency. Any other members with comments or questions? Josh, I think you have one more update.
Yeah, great, thanks. Again, just want to highlight some of the other internal work that has been going on behind the scenes within our division, which has actually been very collaborative. We've been working with branch staff, our Deputy Superintendent, Erica Torres. We've also been working with our Fiscal and Administrative Services Division, as well as Governmental Affairs and Audits and Investigations Division on some of our internal processes. One of them is in administrative review procedures. We've seen an increase in allegations of misuse of funds regarding attendance and allowable costs. And so in the past, we would just take these case by case, and we would kind of mirror our federal program monitoring process. Well, what we needed to do was formalize a process, because with ELOP out there and ACES now in 21st century, we are seeing an uptick in some of these allegations. Just so you know, whenever we do receive an allegation, we take them very seriously. We will look at them, we will investigate them, and so on and so forth. So this is one example that was just recently completed. And again, these are internal documents. So our staff knows what process we will follow when we do get an allegation like this. And this is one example of administrative review procedures based on different types of allegations that we receive for the field regarding misuse of funding or attendance and things like that. So I'll pause there to see if there's any questions that the board has.
Diane has a question.
Yeah.
Actually, it's just kind of a comment. Thank you for highlighting the expenditures and the tracking of that. In conversations with a district, one of the concerns that they've had is just the tracking process, and now adding in an additional layer if they were to get the 21st century and different things like that. So I'm wondering if, not only in looking at the administrative review process, but also looking at how the expenditures are tracked per site, ELOP, ACES, all of that, and trying to streamline the process a bit more might also help with that process.
Can you say more about streamlining the process so we're clear?
I was going to ask her the same thing, Josh.
I'm actually not an accountant, so I don't know. I don't have an exact recommendation. It's just feedback that I've received from the field that it's very complicated and time consuming. And so I don't know if there are ways to streamline any of the financial processes as far as like the tracking per site, ELOP, all of that. I don't know, because I know you have to do it per site. So I just maybe take a look at that as a possible avenue to help folks be more clear on how to actually track that funding.
Yeah, I will say, and again, maybe at a future meeting, we can have our administrator for our program monitoring office attend. But again, for ACES and 21st century, expenditures need to be tracked by site. And I think that's one of the things that we've seen as well. We'll ask for a general ledger, they're not tracked by site, things like that. But at the end of the day, we will always require 4 quarters of expenditure reporting into ASSIST for ACES in 21st century. Everyone does go through an independent audit that is not done by us. And usually we check on expenditures in our division when an agency is going through federal program monitoring, or they may be going through fiscal monitoring with our audits and investigations division. And our fiscal monitors do look at ELOP and 21st century funding. I do not think they look at ACES funding. And so, yeah, I think that's something for a future topic, but based on what I know now, expenditures need to be, separated by site, and they should not be lumped together with other, general funds and things like that. I saw you come off camera, Michael. Did you want to add anything on that, Michael? You good? Okay. The next thing.
Josh, hang on. We have a question from Tia. Sorry.
Sure.
Josh and Michael, thank you for all the great work that you guys are doing to support, especially with all the complexities that we're seeing this year. I have a question around, or I'm curious around, I appreciate the work that you did around kind of giving us an idea how long it takes to get the grant notice out. I'm curious if we could have something similar, a timeline, or kind of what happens internally when payments are delayed, so we could, again, kind of just have a broader understanding of what contributes to that and how we can plan accordingly when that does occur.
Yeah, no, that's definitely good. I think it's something to look at. I can tell you one thing is GANs being sent in timely. And so I know, like, especially for 21st century or 21st and ACES, the initial payment is made on a GAN being signed. And so if again is not sent in a timely manner, the payment will be delayed. But that's definitely something that we can share with you in the future of kind of a timeline of, let's just say once the GAN is received, how long does our payment process take from the time we start the process till the time state controllers sends it out. And it may be an estimation because once it leaves our department, obviously it's the state controllers that's issuing payment. But thank you for that recommendation, Tia. It's something we can work at behind the scenes.
Yeah, Tia, I
Yeah.
think that's a great idea to come back with something similar because it goes through several, I mean, it has to get into our grant making our reporting system assist. That gets translated into, we don't pay one grantee at a time. We have to package things together and then do batch payments. And I'm signing off on an invoice. Sometimes I'm scratching my head, I'm signing off on payments ranging from 100,000 to 23 million. And then once it leaves my office, it then has to go through to a different division within CDE. And then it leaves our building and goes to the state controller's office in a different accounting system called Fiscal. And once it leaves our building, I think state controller is a 2.5 to 3 week process. But I think it would be informative and instructive for us to come back in November with the same type of timeline to help people understand the layers getting money out the door at the state have to go through.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more question from Tiffany.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if it's a question or more so a comment. I was thinking about like the expenditure reports, and I'm thinking about like, and maybe this is the conversation we can have that all ties into the things that are going to come back in November. But like there are some districts that do a really great job of partnering with their community-based organizations, right? They lay out the structure for invoicing so that it aligns with what they have to already kind of report, so that those CBOs are kind of documenting monthly to align with that, so that there's a really easy transition for the district to then be able to kind of gather all that and do some reporting. So maybe if we could also be looking at like, what are some best and promising practices on some of these kind of things that feel like they're issues for some. And sometimes it's size of organization, it's all kinds of things. But I think if we could start to really think about where are some promising and evolving kind of practices throughout the system, because there are some places that are doing some things really, really effectively. But I don't think we ever, like, we always catch the problems. We never catch the things that are going well. And it feels like if that's something we can start to explore so that we have more of a database of here's some ways that this could look, that might be more effective. Because I feel like that's the same thing with people in program plans, right? Like we tried to not give examples out because people then just erase the name and put their name and then submitted a plan. But it's like, if we could show people there's different ways of supporting this work and be able to give people an actual resource that helps them, might get us through some of the things that feel like real struggles. So just thinking about it.
So Tiffany, is it possible that that could be part of the CAN presentation at the November meeting to be able to, because again, closer to the field of knowing where those best practices are and what those districts and those community-based agencies are? You're smiling at me to say no or yes.
I'm smiling to say that we can put forth a real valiant effort.
Okay.
So if I reach out to some of y'all, you'll know why.
Well, and I think it would be, I think you're closer to the field and easier for you to know where it's working best and what those best practices are, so that we could give some examples. So some districts and partnerships that are working, because I hear what you're saying. There are districts who, have really educated their community-based organization in a way that all they have to do, it's seamless. All they have to do is upload because they're following the requirements from CDE instead of having to like reinvent them. So I think that could be a real helpful presentation.
And I think we can also work with the CDE folks, right? Because they are also getting, especially the PMO office, they're starting to see some of the things that work, right? As much as yes. So we can do something.
Perfect, thank you.
Of course.
Back to you, Josh.
All right. The last thing is our payment process and expenditure tracking procedures. Again, an internal document that took quite a long time to develop, again, in collaboration with other divisions internally. And I do definitely want to just highlight this. Again, for those that are on the call, you may have heard from our staff in May about 21st Century and how much you've expended to date and this and that. That was an exercise that we went through. It was based on the high carryover that we had. And we wanted to make sure that our grantees were spending these dollars. But with that, we realized that we needed to do a better job at tracking these expenditures and also providing technical assistance to the field. So for example, like after Q2, if we're seeing someone that has a low percentage of spending, they're going to be contacted by our staff or the system of support for inquiry. Like, hey, you have this money. What's going on? Are you having any difficulties spending it? Are there any barriers that you're having? Like, how can we help? How can we help you? And so that's something moving forward that we're going to be kind of highlighting, and our staff and the system of support is going to be working with LEAs and grantees to ensure that they're spending their money by the deadlines. Michael, anything to add on that?
Well, just that traditionally, what flags our system of support for the need for technical assistance is low attendance. And so what we're adding is low spending to that framework as well.
Yeah, and with that, if there's no question on this, I just want to highlight the importance of grantees submitting their data by the deadline. Attendance, expenditures, annual outcomes-based data, 21 APR data for 21st Century. It is so important that our grantees are submitting the data on time. Again, we are going to be looking at some good standing things moving forward. Again, it will help us and it will help the field because we really need to solidify our deadlines. Again, these are grant funds, these are public funds, and what comes with the grant is a bunch of assurances that are signed by everyone. And so definitely look at those assurances as reminders, but make sure you're managing your grants accordingly and submitting the data and whatever is required from the grant on time. That's my last ask of everyone out there. So thank you very much, Sandy. And we'll take any questions or comments at this time from the board.
Michael?
Sandy, I'm going to have to leave here in just a few minutes for my event. I wanted to publicly thank Josh and Fred Buggs for the organization for this meeting and the excellent communication in advance. So thank you. And I'll leave you in Josh Brady's hands for the rest.
Michael, what number are we at?
231.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Good luck on your and thank you, Josh and Michael, both. Excellent information. And I really want to thank the committee because this is our purpose, right? Asking questions, getting guidance, being able to take that guidance back to the field, to be able to say to them, this is what CDE is saying, this is what we want to work on, this is how we move forward. But also our job of saying, well, what if? Maybe this, can we think of that? Can we have a presentation on this so that we can continue to inform the field? So I am thrilled that Brad talks and asks questions and it spurs all of everybody else to start talking and asking. I'm not the only one. But that, I always used to say, if I don't know what you sound like, you're taking up space and not paying any rent, right? So I want to know what your voice sounds like, what your thoughts sound like. So I'm very excited that the department is so transparent and is constantly bringing this advisory information so that we can ask more questions and being able to take our stewardship back into our communities. And I am thrilled that we have 230, whatever Michael just said, participating today. So I appreciate you. And we will have the opportunity for public comment after our next agenda item. Public comment is going to come in several ways. I just want to remind people to get prepared. There is a 2-minute maximum for public comment. If you're providing public comment via Zoom, you're going to raise your hand feature in the Zoom, and then you'll be prompted to unmute and speak. If you're providing public comment via phone, you're going to press *9 to raise or lower your hand. And when called upon, you'll press *6 to unmute your microphone. I know that on the website, it has the phone number if you're calling in, but I just want to remind people it's 669-900-6833. So just to be prepared, at the end of this discussion item, we will have public comment and be able to communicate with those who are logged in. So at this point, we have the opportunity to talk about emerging issues and what's happening within our programs. I know Brad was already talking a little bit about immigration, but Olivia, I'm going to turn it to you to start.
Thank you. Coming from Region 1, we have had requests in the field for additional support around special education. So any additional resources, support, or guidance is much appreciated.
Thank you. Josh, are we able to tap into special ed to talk about how we have increased access and support for our special ed students in the expanded learning world? I know locally in San Diego, we have agencies who actually focus on that for us and are providing training.
Michael, I see you're still here. Do you want to take that?
Sorry, repeat that question, please.
About special ed and more resources and for access.
And providing services during expanded learning.
I have a meeting with our special education division later this week, a group of our staff and their staff and a bunch of attorneys to talk about more precise and specific guidance around students with disabilities. That's all I can say at this point.
That's amazing. That's exactly what we wanted. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia. Tia?
This is maybe not emergent, it's kind of ongoing. We talked about it before, but it really came up with the withholding of the 21st century funds. Still a lot of confusion with LEAs around how you can use those funds, how you need to document the use of those funds. And I know Michael and Josh, we spoke a little bit about this during this time. And I know so much has been done to provide clarity, but there's just, I don't know if it's turnover, I'm not sure what it is. At least what we're seeing is still a lot of unanswered questions and uncertainty that tend to land on the more conservative side of using the funds or withholding using some of the funds, then kind of leaning into the intent.
T, you're talking ELOP, correct?
Yes, sorry, ELOP. And I don't know if others are seeing that. Like, I don't know if we're the only ones kind of experiencing that with some of our LEAs.
Thoughts, Diane?
I was wondering if we could agendize the next meeting when we talk about the next meeting, just about the assets and the, what we can do as a committee to talk about serving our our older young people. And just some strategies to think about if that goes away.
Brad?
Thank you, Diane. I had a thought on this and I'm concerned about waiting till the next meeting for it. And let me start by saying, I know that Josh, you, Michael, everybody else don't throw out $141 million supplemental grant without thinking through a lot of it. So I apologize if the questions are like, yes, we thought of that. I'm also traumatized by what happened back in June and July of this year, specifically for our older youth. A ridiculous amount of assets funding is used for bridge programs to get 8th graders ready for 9th grade. And they were deep in those programs in late June, early July, when the funds were frozen. So that was probably the place that in the field I saw it most, that there was direct impact on those high school programs with freshman orientation programs, 150 freshmen shown at a high school campus getting ready, and they just got shut down and nowhere. And I'm curious if this new supplemental 141 million, because it's going to carry into September, I wonder if that would alleviate some of the fear that a lot of the high school programs have out there that this is going to happen again. Like, let's not even do a linked crew program or a bridge program. I'm going long here. So I'm curious if there could be a way to look at prioritization of different groups that are under-resourced or less resourced for that 141 million. I've heard about frontier sites that just can't make it work. I've heard about small grants, and we worked really hard to go from 50 to 100,000. I know with these high school programs, they only have the assets grant that they can tap into. I'm curious if there could be a look at prioritization before the 141 million is released, everybody applies, and it just starts with the 99% free and reduced lunch where we give money away.
Michael and Josh, I'm sure you've thought of this in advance.
You want to say something, Michael?
I understand where the question's coming from, and I also understand the constraints that we have in terms of trying to get money out quickly, and the more conditions or prioritization you put on it, that typically has to go through some type of education code. We've tried to put things in the RFA before, in previous years, and were instructed to take them out because it wasn't an ed code. So there's time to talk about assets funding, prioritization. We haven't looked at assets funding for many years. It's been in the same. So if this committee wants to make some recommendations for a look at a longer path, but we don't have time to do something to create a new set of priorities for this one-time funding, or we're not going to get it out the door in time for people to spend it.
Thank you, Michael. I think that then tells us it really is incumbent upon us to get those programs to apply. For all of us who have that concern of older youth, I think we have the opportunity, since this is a brand new public announcement, it is up to us to get them noticed and ready to apply, and know that it is going to be a rather simple process, but it really is, if they don't know about it, they can't apply. So it's on our shoulders now to be able to say, hey, you have this opportunity. I think history has shown us, and a lot of the data we saw today, round one, not enough. Round two, I remember transportation, I think it was round three, so we know that the opportunity is there. We just have to be able to get them ready and willing and able to apply and get them, because I think it is a protection mechanism, right? Brad, to say, look, you can get these funds and you can use them for that summer bridge program, so you are protected. This will be a guarantee for that. So let's get them ready and to apply. So I think that's, kind of coming back to us because of the limitations of the education code. I think I heard Michael clearly that it's like our hands are tied. We've got to get this out. We only have a year. We've got a waiver for a year. Josh, I did want to thank you for the tidings waiver. That was on the bottom of that. But I did have a question of what's the Insular Possessions Committee? See, I read your work.
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know.
I was like, what committee?
But I do want to address one thing that Diane brought up about funding. Again, with ACES, we do have ACES Universal, but we also have ACES Frontier. And this was added to Education Code many years ago for frontier sites to apply for transportation funding, $15,000 per site. And we still have quite a few that have never applied. We even years ago formed focus groups with rural and frontier sites. We updated the RFA for more flexibility. And there are still quite a few frontier sites that never apply. I think we still issue the RFA on an annual basis. We may have one apply. So I think this past year we did fund another site, but that is another funding for those frontier sites that is released every year. And the list is updated on an annual basis. Agencies can check to see if they're frontier, even on the ELOP FAQs. There's a whole, it shows all the LEAs that qualify for Frontier based on the 2020 census. So I just wanted to highlight that as well, because that's something that wasn't discussed.
Thank you. Tiffany?
Yeah, my team is about to be mad at me. I'm thinking, Brad, right, that something that might feel helpful. One of the challenges that it feels like that I hear a lot from the field, and over the last month or so, my team has already trained over a couple of thousand folks, right? And one of the things that both you and Tia kind of elevated is that sometimes people don't know how they can use the funding. And so then that prevents them from going forward, or they think that there's a lot more rigor and a lot more, like, I don't want to say structure, but that there's a lot more red tape than there really is. Not saying it used to not be that way, but it did. But I was just wondering, we were already thinking, Cam was already talking about reconvening the kind of older youth group that met, because it felt like it was at least a starting place for us to have a more field-driven kind of conversation and dialogue. But we weren't trying to do that until like deeper in the fall. But I'm wondering, would a simple conversation or at least a convening of folks just to get together to say, here are some promising practices, so we could push something out into the field to say, you could go for this funding and here's how you could use it. Here's what that could look like. Because then maybe we could have more people that would be open to doing that. Again, y'all might get another email, just saying.
Well, and I think that's a great idea, Tiffany, because I think it is. I mean, it goes to Tia's point of either I don't go at all, or I go conservatively, or I just don't know enough, right? And so I think that would be helpful. Sorry if your team's mad at me too. But I think it could be a benefit to the field. Julie?
Just a couple of things in response to that, Tiffany, too. I think helping the field with other funding streams within that broader ecosystem that can be blended and braided or layered to support those older youth programs, I think would also be really helpful, because 21st Century is a limited pool. So just a thought there.
Yeah, so just, we can say this on the record. So that is definitely a real intentional conversation that we're trying to build out, that T and I were talking about this earlier, how I was saying that I don't believe in pulling money from one group that needs it to give it to another group that needs it, right? And I do think that when it comes to older youth, we have the opportunity to leverage different funding that hasn't either systemically been looked at or it hasn't consistently been looked at. Like, there's some places that have these amazing multi-funded strategies that are supporting young people, college to career, and really looking at how they want to explore the adults they want to be and how they want to contribute. I don't think that happens throughout our entire structure, because we've always, and just thinking even before ELOP, we only fought for the funds we had, not the funds that we needed. And I think that we have an opportunity to think really differently about that. So we are trying to look at, and if we anchor it in workforce, right? Because workforce opens the door to a lot of conversations, but it also creates space for a lot more partners to come into our schools. And that doesn't have to be limited just to high school. We can drill that all the way down. And so how are we actually doing that? So that's definitely some work that the field has pushed is necessary for some conversation. So we're even looking at all of the strategies that we used to have. We had conferences that were just for middle school and high school youth. We had other groups that met. So we are trying to look back at all those things. And some of those conversations are also, you heard the presentation that Heather and Jeff were doing, is also coming up in the design space, right? Because it's clearly being articulated that these are needs that the field is like wanting, but in truth, we keep having crisis after crisis to manage. And so people don't always feel like they have that. So we're trying to figure out, how do we balance, there's critical supports that the field needs right now, but then also how do we create some better long-term strategy so we don't keep ending up in this place? So, yeah.
Thank you, Tiffany. Julie?
Thank you, Tiffany. I just have a couple other things. I do want to come back to immigration. I just want to make sure when it comes to attendance forgiveness, there are still a lot of communities that are under deep threat. We don't know what the impacts are going to be for this school year, but I just want to make sure that we're still really top of mind with that. I know that's true in Los Angeles, but I'm sure it's true in other regions as well. And then back to, and I know this is our favorite thing to talk about, but back to helping people understand how to blend and braid in one comprehensive program. We are still seeing, like, we're seeing RFPs issued that it's like just to be your ACES provider, right? There is still a lot of like real lack of understanding of how it works. So I guess I don't know if it's a question, it's more of a comment, but maybe it's a question of like, can we also help to flag some of those things when we see it, so that those, so that there can be technical assistance provided when we see, right? I don't know if that's the way to do it, but we're seeing RFPs released that are not within the spirit of the comprehensive program. And I just want to point that out.
Thank you. And I think, I see that also, and it's a constant conversation. One program, one program, one program. No parent or child needs to know how it's funded. They're not interested if you're an ACES kids or an ELP kids or 20, it doesn't matter. It's one program. You think about, and it kind of boggles my mind, because I think about at a school site, they have so many funding streams. No one knows what's what, right? But yet somehow this has got confusing. And I'm like, you have 50 funding streams, you have titles, and it's like you do it on all these other things, but not on this one. And so I think it's a constant communication. I think CAN has done some great training, some great, fact sheets trying to educate, but I think it's something that it's just it's going to be an ongoing conversation. And it is going to be, again, incumbent upon us to continue to have that conversation. When I'm at a school site and I'm watching these two, I'm like, wait, why are you over here and you're over, wait, what happened? And just saying, and being able to say it at the site level, but also the district level, one comprehensive braided program. And I think it's going to take a couple years because they just saw, I think because expanded learning was, hesitant for so many, right? The districts were saying, hey, we got our day, we're full, I can't take on something else. And then we just kept going on and on. So I do think it's going to be back to us to be able to continue that conversation. I know the department has done a boatload of work on this and continues to do fact sheets and FAQs and I know at Boost, everywhere we're trying to get the information out. It's going to be an ongoing effort. Michael or Josh, did you have any comments on that topic? Okay.
Well, school districts are doing what we trained them to do. You think about it, 10 years ago, if you had, and it's still separate, you've got school age care license programs. Those kids can't mingle with these kids. They can't be in the same space. The staffing requirements are different. And so we've taught people who oversee categorical programs that for the most part, these things need to be treated separately. And we've reinforced that a bit with ACES in 21st Century, because while if they have both, they run one program, but you can't count a kid for ACES and 21st on the same day. It's one day or the other. Then you put ELOP in the midst and you say, oh, you can count them for ELOP. And now we're trying to say, no, you don't have it. Is exactly what you said, Sandy. You don't have an ELOP kid and an ACES kid and a 21st Century kid, except you do when you're counting attendance for ACES or 21st Century. So it's complicated, but it's not that complicated. We just have to chip away at this. And I think, once again, the amount of reductions that took place are helping us be a catalyst for some districts being more open to coaching.
Thank you. Diane?
I was just thinking about the immigration comment and the issue of attendance relief and just thinking about what's been going on in LA and then now in DC. And I'm wondering if we can have a conversation about like safe routes to school and transportation funding and just different things like that, just to put it out there and just think about ways that we can support our schools and school districts and ensuring that young people, their children are able to get to the school, or parents are able to. And I don't know what that looks like, but I know Safe Routes to School as an initiative, looked a little differently than how I'm framing it today. But I do think that just thinking about what's happening after school hours and kids walking home and those types of things, I don't know, I'm concerned about that and want to see if there's a possibility to bring that up in a conversation.
So, and I know obviously Safe Routes to School was originally focused on violence and ensuring that kids were able to get to school to learn, right? And so I haven't seen that same conversation twist or turn to say, how do we expand it? And I don't mean to eliminate the violence part, but how do we expand it to ensure immigration is part of that, right? And so I think that's an awesome idea. I just don't know where we would take it. Tony, you had a thought?
Where we would take it. No, that was, so my thought was really just putting a nice big stamp on that. Still in Los Angeles urban area, we still have violent lines, right? That we have to work out. I'm seeing a lot of that in particularly south part of Los Angeles still. But yeah, you're right. I mean, when you have federal administration bringing people through with snipers in your neighborhood, you scare the crap out of after school providers anywhere within proximity. And so we saw attendance dip. It was intentional, in my view, to be at one park and then come driving around the neighborhood to show. So people are really scared. And I think this is a good time to maybe consider, at least for a short period of time, something similar to like a Frontier program that helps kids get safely to and from the after school program. Might be a recommendation for a short period of time, but because these are unique times.
Well, and I know, and Brad continues to educate me that, attendance relief is for a whole day in the school shutting down. How do we look at attendance relief a little differently? I think about Imperial County, San Diego County, Los Angeles, that has such a significant loss due to the fear, due to the cross-border youth, how long it's taking, if they can even get to school. I don't know, Josh, if the department has had any conversations, I'm sure you have, but how do we look at attendance relief? And I'm assuming attendance relief is legislatively coded. So it would probably be a legislative fix that we would need to have to be able to look at it through the lens of immigration. So it's not the whole day, whole school shut down.
Yeah, that's correct, Sandy. It is an education code. It would require some sort of fix or update to that. And so again, if that's a recommendation of the committee, I think we would need something a little bit more details from the board to give us something to work with. But yeah, right now we can only do what the law allows us to do.
So what I would ask, sorry, Tiffany.
No, I got it, because I'm wondering as we try to explore this, right? Because there are some places that are doing some things. Now, the thing that's proven really interesting is it's usually been kind of led and held by the community-based organizations because they have more flexibility, but it's supported by the school district. So we were just in Oxnard a couple of weeks ago, and they have a full presentation they did for all expanded learning folks that says, this is what we do. This is what is safe here. This is what can and cannot happen. They've shifted like you don't put your 18-year-old staff person at sign out anymore, right? It needs to be a more seasoned team member that fully understands who can and cannot come on campus, because if you have no connection to kids, you cannot come on campus. Like, it's just what it is. But they also are doing these partnering things in other places where promotoros from the community who are fully legal residents do walking school buses, homes. Like, they're strategies that have evolved out of how everything else is devolving around them, right? And I think that it would be interesting for us to look at like what are some strategies that people could like immediately hold and do, but then also being really explicit about the attendance piece is critical, because there are kids that are just they're not coming. And or if they do come to school, they leave immediately after school because that's when some other caring adult can get them home, right? Like parents like that may not be able to do that. So I do believe that I think there are things to do both in the interim and us to have a conversation long-term about a policy shift that could be supportive.
Julie?
I agree. I think I just encourage us to continue to share practices that are keeping kids safe and family safe, right? Like we're doing operational things to minimize just time out of cars and things, right? I think the other thing to designate or to point out is that this is costing schools money, right? We have schools that have to hire private security because of the very, very present threat, like on the street, right? So I don't know what to be done with that, but like this is really impacting schools in certain neighborhoods. But
Brad?
I just want to echo, for me, it's a both and. I feel like we definitely have to have the conversation about the safe spaces and about safety for our students, and that is absolutely critical. And I would love to be part of hearing what some of the best practices are. And there's the attendance relief piece that I feel like is a parallel question. My fear is that even in the conversation we just had about this supplemental grant, if you took a reduction and the reason you took a reduction was because the kids can't be at school and feel safe, you're not eligible to apply for more funding to improve the quality of your program. So I'd like to have that conversation simultaneously as how do we not penalize economically communities that are already being penalized by an immigration system that is targeting them. So yes, let's have the conversation about safe spaces, and simultaneously, let's have the conversations about ways we can not fiscally penalize communities that are already traumatized.
Tia?
Yeah, just to add to that, Brad, what you're saying, I agree with everything that is being said. And in addition, is there potentially future harm that can be done? Because what we're hearing on the ground is that parents are afraid to fill out this paperwork that they have in the past. They don't want to be tracked. They don't want to, any way, because of the impact that could happen. So I think that's something impacting the parents right now, but I do think there could be a long-term effect. And I remember going back, I think it was a long time ago, I won't say how long, we experienced that also when I was in LA. There was a kind of things were happening that parents were afraid. So I'm just curious about how we can think about that as a committee to support all of our families and the sustainable funding to provide services for their students and them.
So just to remind everyone, as we go through the agenda, I am constantly writing down what's going to be on our next agenda. And so some of the things I've talked about is the department coming back with unspent funds by region, so we can have that kind of conversation of where we have gaps. The impact of fires and other emergencies, and having Josh come back with the attendance relief data for ACEs in 21st century, so we could again have a more informed discussion. The department to come back with a better understanding of the payment system, the timeline of when the GAN comes in, then what happens and where does it all go and how does it work its way through the system? And working with both CAN and the department, the best and promising practice on expenditure reporting, working in a seamless setting with both the CBO and the LEA. Having a conversation on older youth prioritization, having that, I know Tiffany had a great idea of reforming that committee to be able to kind of come together as like stakeholders to talk about that. But I do think at the next meeting, we should also be having strategies for how we support our immigrant student safety and what are the best practices that are out there, as well as to Brad's point about attendance relief for those districts that aren't shut down, but yet have temporary attendance relief for those districts that have a large portion of immigrant students who just aren't even attending, who are too afraid to come, too afraid that they won't see their parents again at the end of the day, or too afraid that they won't see their kids at the end of the day. So I'm just kind of jotting those down as we move forward. So will be on the record at the end, but as we move forward, I do want to bring up another emerging issue, and that has to do with airlines. LA contingent has an issue. They can't get here in time because the flights changed. They can't get here at 9:30 unless they come in the night before, which is a fiscal constraint for our LA folks. And so I know I saw a couple emails, asking, is it possible that we could start at 10 o'clock? just go a little bit later so that they can catch that first morning flight, because I don't know if it was Southwest or whoever you were flying on, but I think it changed and they've canceled that earlier morning flight. So it puts a hindrance on several of our members. So I wanted to kind of query the members of how they would feel if we started at 10 o'clock. Any objection? Okay, I think we have an agreement on that to help LA get here and not have to spend the night and spend more money out of their pockets. So
Thanks from Los Angeles.
you're welcome. Let's continue the conversation of any emerging issues, anything that people are seeing. Please, Cindy.
So we are seeing such a change in our staffing, and Tiffany alluded to it a little bit, that they are very young. And so what we've had to do, well, first off, staffing has been an issue. We can't get staff. We're starting to get staff, but we're kind of growing our own, I guess is how to say it. So we have high school students who work on our programs, and then I have really been working with them to continue with us as adults, but they're still 18. And I'm just wondering if anybody, I mean, I think some strategies would be great. Maybe I'm sorry to put that on you again, but maybe there's some tips and tricks or something. What we've ended up doing is doing a little orientation that I took off of my student assistant orientation, because little things like dressing appropriate and arriving on time and not talking about your weekend activities, things like that. So I don't know if everyone's experiences this, if it's just our small town that's doing it, but I wanted to put it out there so that maybe at another conference or something. I have attended a young workforce session before. That was really helpful. But I just wanted to see if anybody had any wisdom.
Hello, everybody. We found to be really helpful partnering with high school programs that offer career and college and career readiness. If they have grants that would allow for students to work in your program paid through their funds. We've also, in our program, partnered with the Department of Rehabilitation for any students with special needs. So they're also getting paid by DOR to get job skills. And to say that pressure would be taken away from you, that certainly wouldn't be true, because it is tough to have a young entry-level workforce, but they're gaining those skills before they're counting to ratio. And it kind of goes into just braiding funds, understanding what your community already has in place, so that when they finally get that 1-10 or 1-20 ratio, they have some more skills. And I think we've also had to see it as our summer startup training is really heavy on, the behavior management, the incentives, and how to work in a program. That certainly does take a lot of time. But those are just a couple of things that I found to be helpful. And while I have the mic, I think Olivia was talking about special needs, and what I understand, and I know Michael had mentioned having a meeting with that department. I think what the field needs is a framework. How do we have discussions with our school districts? If you're the CBO, how do we have those conversations from start to finish? And I know every student has different needs. It's certainly not a one size fits all, but a framework of, we talk to our SOPA organization, get a waiver. We talk about the IEP. Then we have a meeting with a parent, or do we just have a phone call? I think just the start to finish framework would help a lot of programs that aren't privy to the special education field. And it would be more accessible and understandable to a lot of new programs. Because I think since ELOP, we are introduced to newer people in the field who are now grantees of ELOP, where we've been in the field for a long time. So I think that accessibility and framework would be really helpful.
Thank you. That's great. I'm actually going to pivot because we do have public comment, and I want to make sure we have room for that. So I just want to remind the public that you can participate and ask questions. You have a 2-minute framework. You can do it by Zoom. And I know, Josh, I think you said we have some hands raised. First, I want to thank all the public for participating. We're glad you get to see us in action. And actually, we're no longer a mystery. I know that we have public also present today, so for those who are present and who want to speak, you just need to fill out a speaker slip in the back of the room. You're going to hand it over to Fred. They're back by the door, and we'll be able to weave you in. So, Josh, why don't we go with those who have their hands raised via Zoom or on the phone?
Sure. I think Kindred was going to do this, but Kindred, I can see I can see the hands up. So I'll call on them, but you may have to unmute them or whatnot. So I think the first person I see is Zachary Cruz. Your hands up. Feel free to speak. And hold on a second. Trying to unmute you. Kindred, are you able to unmute him? For some reason, it's my mouse is not working, allowing me to do that.
Yeah, I got it. Sorry about that. Yeah, that was a mistake. I didn't have a question or anything like that. Sorry about that.
All right, we'll go to the next one. Elizabeth Garcia, your hands up.
Elizabeth, are you unmuted and you can speak?
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Did you have a question? I was taking a call from a parent.
So do you have any comment, Elizabeth? I saw your hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did not mean to raise my hand. So
Okay,
sorry.
we're 0 for 2. We're going to go for a third one. Adrian Hurd. Can we unmute her?
Adrian, you're unmuted.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I want to thank the committee for opening this up virtually so that we could participate and see the great work that you all are doing. I come on behalf of a segment of California students, and that's those who attend private schools, primarily Catholic schools in California. And under 21st Century, those schools are able to participate in 21st Century programs in partnership with the university. And the University of California, Berkeley has done work in these schools, some of which have as high as 95% free and reduced lunch for the past 15 years. And during the time when 21st Century funds were withheld, we did a campaign with Washington, with the faith-based appointees in the administration to preserve 21st centuries, to give these students access to 21st century program funds. And given the amount of funds that are available, and that these students are completely deserving and should not be penalized because of the type of organization that is providing their education. And so I would like to work with the Expanded Learning Division and the governmental affairs person at CDE to include a provision that high poverty Catholic schools, most of which are in urban areas, and provide economic stability for families, safe routes and passage to school, and academic support, that these students should be included. I think equity demands it, justice demands it, and if we are going to be the better example and model, we did ask that that provision be included in state block grants at Washington. So I'd like to address that with the committee. Approximately 10% of all students in California attend private schools, and approximately 77% of those, these are 2021 statistics, are attending Catholic schools. So I just like to make that comment, and I appreciate Josh and Michael, all you all are able to do to guide us and direct us how we can serve these deserving families with after-school funds.
Thank you so much for your comments. Thank you. We appreciate your participation. Thank you, Adrian.
Great.
Josh,
Thank
next
you, Adrian.
speaker.
Yep. Thank you, Adrian. Next up is Jennifer Davis.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jennifer Davis. I am calling from Kern County, Central California. And I would like to, somebody had brought up training staff and issues that they were having with getting young people trained. And so one of the things that we've done in our district is, so we're allowed 3 days of professional development, 3 days to be closed for our program. We put all 3 of those days at the beginning of the school year and trained alongside our certificated staff during their days. We've worked very hard at making being inclusive of our classified staff and making them part of the district and part of the school day as far as what we provide to our kids. But I would, because a lot of our staff come to have jobs before us or they're in school, it's difficult for us to do professional development in the morning, and we close at 6. So in the evening, it could be a little difficult too. And so my ask is to have some consideration for us to be able to have a couple more days that we can use during the year so that we can stay on top of our staff and continue to give them professional development. As we know, we get turnover because we have a lot of college kids. And so I feel like having that just at the beginning of the year isn't enough. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for making that comment.
Okay, next up, Lupita Cruz.
Lupita, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hi, I'm Lupita Cruz and I'm calling from Santa Ana Unified School District. I'm the director of the Expanded Learning Programs. And I just want to take the time to say I appreciate all the great work this committee has done. And I thank you for welcoming us to join virtually. Much of what was shared today offered clarity to me. So I appreciate getting front hand in terms of what's being discussed. I did have a question, and I appreciated one of the members who brought up immigration concerns and was curious if there's been any discussion on whether ACES attendance percentage requirements might be waived in areas experiencing immigration raids and serving populations most affected by this. So I just wanted to kind of make sure to answer that question. I'm not sure if you're able to reply to that, but.
Yeah, and Lupita, what I did mention that the attendance is in legislative mandate, so it would have to be something that we look at legislatively. So we're going to talk about that at our next meeting about potentially making a recommendation to propose legislative changes to the attendance, but currently that's not allowable because it's for the attendance relief is for the full day, all day school. So it isn't for, partial with part of the kids gone and part of the kids not gone. But we will talk about that at our November meeting.
Great, thank you. And can I ask one clarifying question?
Sure. We'll see if we can answer.
In terms of that process, what does that process look like and what's the length to really be able to make some impact on that?
So that's the legislative process actually starts in January. So bills would be introduced on the legislative floor to make changes. It is a lengthy process. If it's an emergency bill, it can be signed usually in the mid to late spring, around May or June, and it could take effect immediately. Many times it's not an urgency bill, which means it doesn't take effect if it does pass through the process. It has to then go to get chaptered or signed and chaptered, and it would take effect in January of 27. So we'll have that conversation as an advisory, but legislatively, it's a process. It's longer than getting things through CDE.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right. Jennifer Davis, did you have another comment?
No, I don't. I'm good. Thank you so much.
Okay. Great. It looks like Mark Sermanian, did you have a comment, Mark? Or it looks like Alice. Do you have a comment, Alice? I'm not seeing any more hands up, Sandy. Actually, it looks like we have Mark Sermanian. Do you have a comment, Mark?
Oh. Yeah, can you hear me, Josh?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I couldn't figure out how to get off mute, so I got scared there, but you guys helped me. I would just add on to Lupita's point. I think if we're going to open up a legislative, whatever efforts we're going to look at legislatively for ACEs, we definitely need to look at some type of COLA or some type of reimbursement rate conversation as well, because what I think we're talking about here is a pending fiscal cliff with ELOP, and things are great now, but planning and looking ahead at the state budget, how are we going to offset that if these services just kind of vanish? I'm certain and sure that that's stuff you've talked about before, but I just don't want to forget about the core funding of ACEs and how protected that was in times when we really did see some fiscal challenges in the state. And because we don't have that federal backstop, I think it becomes more of an imperative to move forward. So just my 2 cents on that as well. Thanks, Josh. And thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you, Mark. Anyone else, Josh?
Yeah, we got Ben Gonzalez.
Yes, good morning, whatever's left of it. I just wanted to say what an honor and privilege to be in this space with each and every one of you. Thank you so much for just advocating for the youth across the state and really advocacy at just shining a light on California. I really appreciate everyone's leadership, your questions, your insight, and just grateful and thankful for each and every one of you making this happen today. So appreciate you.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. We appreciate finally being in public. So it's taken us a while to get here, but we are excited and it worked so well today. So thank you.
We have another one, Connie Cha.
Hello, everyone. This is Connie Cha, Director of Expanded Learning from Fresno Unified School District in the Central Valley. Hi, Josh, and hi, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for giving many of us the opportunity to join in today. Yes, ditto, echoing everything that's already been mentioned. Thank you so much for joining arms and leading and making sure that we do everything we can to protect funding, because that all in all protects our youth across corner to corner of our great state of California. That also protects our families and our communities. And so on behalf of everybody from every corner of our state, thank you for your leadership, your advocacy, and your voice for all of our youth and the communities and families we serve.
Thank you very much. Josh, do we have anyone else virtually?
Yeah, I'm going to give it to Fred. It looks like we've got some people in the back.
You mean well, Josh, they finally just sat down. I was about to call on them. They've been standing this whole time. They finally
I couldn't
sat
see
down.
him. I just had a feeling.
Please.
Hello, my name is Vanessa Lopez from Riverbank Unified School District. I just wanted to start by saying thank you for inviting us. We're excited to be here and we look forward to attending more in-person meetings. I'm a program manager at Riverbank Unified and I specifically oversee our assets program. So I'm really passionate when I hear about some of the challenges, pros and cons. I did want to speak to the comment about some strategies on how we can really get our youth into working or creating a pipeline. So we have a community service to career pipeline. What we do right now with our high school students is we get them to volunteer on our ELOP Saturdays. So it's exposing them to our expanded learning programs, working with our youth. And then I'm proud to say that we've hired about 4 of our recent graduates to work in our expanded learning as ASP leaders. So that's one strategy, but we work closely with our leadership groups on campuses and just really maximizing the community service aspect of it.
Thank you for sharing. We appreciate that.
Hello, my name is Armando Nunez. I'm the program grant manager at Riverbank Unified School District, overseeing our expanded learning programs. And I just wanted to touch on a couple of items that I wanted to share out for some positive feedback. And Riverbank is a school district of about 3,000 students. We're over 3,000 students, and we're serving over 600 of those in after-school programs combined through ACES, ELOP, and our assets grant. I want you to know, just this as my first time being here and hearing you guys in person, today I will leave with you guys filling my bucket. And so as I'm here standing before you representing our students and the good work that's being done at the state level, you oftentimes, as much as myself, are not able to see the difference we're making day in and day out with our students. And that's usually my frontline staff, my advisors at the school sites. I feel like everyone here is doing the right thing. And so I want to make sure you guys also feel good about the conversations you guys are having. So I'm here to say thank you to the advisory committee, our Region 6, specifically Danielle Jones, and the CDE team and the CAN team that have been very supportive of our journey. In the last 3 years that both Vanessa and I have been at Riverbank Unified, I can tell you we have more than doubled our numbers in after-school program. We've helped decrease chronic absenteeism, reduce suspension rates, created strong alliances with our schools and our community partners. We have a monthly Riverbank Community Collaborative that continues to grow with building partnerships, and that those partnerships continue to grow and grow. So I'm going to try to touch on, I know I have 2 minutes and they cautioned me. So talking about the decreased absenteeism, reducing suspension rates, that is particularly because we've increased parent engagement. And we've also partnered with PIQE, a statewide organization, a national organization really, that really helps support that, building that bridge and getting parents included at the table. So we've created an inclusive environment that also puts special needs students and foster youth. And so as I'm here, and we had a lot of different conversations today, I can tell you one story of one of our students who was waiting for a para to provide him one-on-one support, and he was able to start program yesterday, Monday. And so these are the students that we're all advocating for, regardless of their backgrounds, regardless of their needs. And these are the conversations you guys are having, and specifically, Brad, the questions you keep asking, and for clarification and supporting these youth. I think everyone here is doing what's right for kids. And at the end of the day, that's why we're all here. We're doing what's right for kids. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here today. We're thrilled to have you with us. Come anytime. Josh, do we have any more public comment on Zoom?
At this time, there's no public comment, but I'll just give another opportunity in case anyone is still listening. If anyone has any comments, raise your hand. So we'll give it a few seconds. Looks like we do have a hand up. Jerry Castro.
So Jerry, you'll be our last public comment for this meeting. Can you share?
Yes, good morning. I am the coordinator for Riverside Unified School District, and we would just like to thank you. We went from 3 years ago with an average daily attendance of under 2,000. We have currently enrolled 8,750 students. Our average daily attendance is around 6,000, and we are full inclusion. And so our parents thank you, our staff thanks you, and we just really are so appreciative of the work you're doing. We feel completely supported by the CDE. Whenever we ask questions, they get answered, and we really do appreciate the systems of support. And the fact that we have parents calling us and thanking us that they're able to make their rent, they're able to go back and get their degrees, they're able to work full time, and it is because of ELOP supporting our ACES programs. So we really do appreciate the support. Thank you.
Jerry, thank you so much. I have to say, I'm really liking public comment. I was here during some very difficult times, and some of you, we used to have this auditorium full because there wasn't regulations and there wasn't policies and procedures behind Prop 10 when it first came out. And I can tell you that we had hecklers. And we had security and we had to escort some people out of this room. And so I'm loving this public comment. This is just very different. I want to thank everyone's participation. I really want to thank the CDE staff, Kendra, everyone who made this happen. You guys have been working for so long. It was smooth sailing, and it was not because of not your hard work. I know you practiced, you had mocks, you came in and tried it on different things. And so this is the new beginning for us to be public, to be able to have the public participate, but it is the staff behind us whose shoulders we stand on to make this happen. So I really want to thank all of you. I want to reiterate a couple things just for the record, for our next agenda in November. To have the unspent funds by region, so we can kind of have that conversation of where are we seeing those gaps of community-based organizations and LEAs, the potential partnership. We want to have a conversation on that relief attendance data for ACEs in 21st century that's impacted by the fires and other natural emergencies. Have a better understanding of the payment delays, what that timeline looks like once the information is submitted, where does it go, how many different divisions and branches and agencies does it have to go through? The best and promising practices on expenditure reporting with the LEAs and CBOs working in a seamless fashion. Have a conversation on prioritizing older youth for current or for upcoming assets and 21st century RFAs. Strategies for supporting immigrant students to get safely to school and a home, and what are those best practices? Attendance relief for immigration, and what would that look like? Where would we take that? And a conversation on resources available for special ed students. And Chris, you talked about a framework and working with the department and the special ed division to say, what would that look like for the field? And the start date of 10 a.m. in November. So we will start at 10. So we'll go from 10 to 12:30 to make sure that we have enough time, but we'll make that adjustment too. Did I miss anything from any member? Again, I want to thank everyone's participation. Josh, do you have any final words?
No final words. Just
You're
want to thank
muted.
all the board members. Just want to thank all the board members and all the public comment, those that attended virtually, and the CDE team, along with our technology services division, working behind the scenes to make this happen. And definitely look forward to seeing everyone in November.
All right. So I am formally adjourning the California Before and After School Advisory. Thank you for all attending.